All right, we are live, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Lake County. Have a recurring special guest on tonight, Matt Lowry. Matt Lowry is a physics teacher at, you just told me, Lake Forest High School and College of Lake County. Hello, Matt. How are you, sir?
Hi, David. Good. I'm doing good. Happy New Year.
Good. I'm glad to have you back. Last
Yeah.
time I had you on a few weeks ago, we were talking politics mostly and current events. You're also the head of the Fremont District Democratic chapter. Is that correct?
Yeah. Fremont Township Democratic Party. Right.
There you go. All right, cool. Today we might, we'll see how the conversation goes, but we're going to try to keep it about AI and where physics and philosophy meet because he is a physicist and has a degree in philosophy. I have a philosophy of science degree and studied system science. So there's some overlap for sure. And I have, like I think mentioned last time, at least off air, is that I have a good friend of mine who he's a PhD candidate for physics. And he and I have chatted and maybe even about philosophy and physics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So both each camp, philosophy and physics, kind of want to take the reign on a few issues and no, this is our issue. And they're like, no,
Right.
this is my issue. So we're just gonna have to learn to share. But I was thinking, I think a lot of people are super interested in hearing about the AI thing because it's both terribly exciting and terribly horrifying simultaneously. So
Yeah.
why don't you just kick off that part of the conversation?
Okay. First thing I think we need to do when we have this discussion about AI, artificial intelligence, is we really need to kind of get our definitions right because there's a lot of misconceptions about what AI is. And a lot of those misconceptions, I think, come out of, honestly, a lot of it comes out of, science fiction and movies and so on and so forth. Um, So the first thing that you have to understand when we talk about artificial intelligence is there's different kinds of artificial intelligence. Okay, so and the probably most commonplace one that's around us all the time, that a lot of your listeners and you have probably used, like if you have an iPhone like I do, or something like that, you've got Siri on the iPhone. You've got Alexa, right, and all of these sorts of things. And these are actually technically forms of AI, but they're what's called weak AI, in that they only can do like very, very specific tasks. And the other thing is that there's a lot of, in my opinion, misconceptions about AI because of how we interact with it, how humans actually interact with the technology. And because of that, we have a tendency to kind of place or project human characteristics onto the technology. We have a way of anthropomorphizing the technology. So, for example, since I mentioned Siri earlier, you say something like, "Here, I'll just activate her. Hey, Siri," right? And there she is, and cancel. And you cancel Siri. Sorry, she didn't shut off. I'm referring to her as she, right, in this conversation. And in many cases, we humans, we talk to this machine, right, Alexa or Siri or whatever, and we talk to it almost as if it's a person. I've actually caught myself when I activate the Siri Weak AI, and I do something like ask, what's the weather today, and I get an answer. I'll actually catch myself sometimes saying thank you right to it, and then it actually says back to you, well, you're welcome, right? And so in that interaction, we have, I think, this tendency to, place human characteristics on this technology that is not necessarily, I don't know, I wouldn't say, I guess the word you can use, say, is appropriate or whatever. And so that's the most common sort of quote AI that we have around us is that sort of stuff. Now, other people, when they think of AI, they think of, I'm going to date myself here as a proud Gen Xer. They think of Skynet, right? From the old Terminator movies. And that's kind of like the doom and gloom type scenario of AI, right? This this technology develops to the point where it becomes self-aware, and it becomes conscious, right? And basically, it essentially becomes a life form like us, but with electrical circuits instead of, biomechanical circuitry like we have. So when you're talking about that kind of AI, that's different than obviously from Siri and Alexa and all that sort of stuff. That's sometimes what is called, if you kind of go in gradations from weak AI, there's what's called strong AI, which is also sometimes referred to as artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And AGI is supposed to be this, we haven't quite gotten there yet. It's supposed to be artificial intelligence technology, which is generally good at doing all the things that a human could do. Right now, we're kind of in a weird zone right now. We have the weak AI stuff with Siri and Alexa, and then we have some AI technology that can do like one thing really better than humans can do. But we haven't quite gotten to AGI yet, artificial general intelligence, where we have artificial intelligence technology which can do anything better than or anything as good, I should say, as any human can do, right? And then on the far extreme end, the Skynet example, that's what's called ASI, artificial superintelligence, right? And the idea of artificial superintelligence is, if the technology can progress to a certain level, it gets to the point where, it becomes superhuman, so to speak, in its intelligence and ability, and it can do anything better than humans can ever possibly do. And, this is again where you get to the sort of the, I don't know, either the utopian or doomsday scenario, or wherever you want to interpret it as, of, you have this basically super intelligent, artificial intelligent life form that can teach itself, and it just kind of exponentially becomes more and more brilliant and powerful and so on, and can do whatever. That's sort of the Skynet version. Where we are now with the technology, well, we got a ton of this stuff around. We have some artificial intelligence technology that can actually do certain things better than humans, but we haven't quite gotten to AGI, artificial general intelligence, and we're way far away from artificial superintelligence. Now, depending upon who you talk to, people say, well, how close are we to AGI? How close are we to artificial superintelligence? Depending upon who you talk to, the estimates can vary. You hear some people say, oh, we are merely a year or two away from artificial superintelligence. And then you have other people that say, well, we're 50 years away from it. Right. Right. It's, again, I don't know. Nobody, I think, really knows. But there's a lot of people working on it because, it's kind of a new technological arms race at this point.
Yeah, no, that's great that you separated these different categories and degrees of AI, because that's important to know.
Yeah.
Alexa or Siri aren't going to take over the world, but ASI might. I doubt it, but it might. Remember, at the end of the day, you can always just pull the plug out. So if it gets too bad. But the idea, I think, of like this notion of like self-awareness of any sort of like algorithmic system is interesting philosophically, because have you ever heard of Kirk Yordell?
Yeah, I believe I have. Yeah.
He was a logician / mathematician who gave two theorems called the incompleteness theorems that rocked the entire world of logic, mathematics, philosophy, and computers back in the 1930s. He was considered the greatest logician ever. Mm-hmm. That's no small title.
Right.
And I can't even repeat it right now. I knew it at one time, and I wouldn't even if I could, but that his theorems show that it's impossible for any algorithmic-based system, which is every computer system ever by definition, to develop human intuition. Like, it's logically impossible. Mm-hmm. And whatever degree human intuition has to do with our consciousness, our awareness towards the world, and how we our epistemological capacities about things, a computer by definition cannot get there. It's literally impossible. If he's right, he could be right. I don't think he can't see how he could be wrong. But anyway, so that's a big Okay, but that doesn't mean that it can't get to a point where it's just monstrous in its own algorithmic capacity. That's
Mhm.
still a lot of calculational power. Computers used to be very, they could do this one bit of data, then the next bit of data, then the next bit of data. With AI, I think it's called super suspension. I don't quote me on that, but it can like process algorithmically billions of bit of data like that. That's why it's so fast. However, they got to that point, I don't know. I need to look into that. That's pretty damn cool. I use
Well,
Chappy. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, go on.
I use Chat GPT all the time.
Mhm.
I'll just ask it, like, again, as a philosopher and as a logician, I'll be like, give me a logical proof for Plato's metaphysics, and there it is, and it's all the logical symbols and language and characters and everything else. And I'm like, wow, yeah. I mean, I'll read through it. I'm like, yeah, that's right. So stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty cool, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, since you mentioned ChatGPT, which is the most commonly cited example of the modern uh, use of artificial intelligence, the well, the first thing I'll mention is again, kind of going back to my original statement about how we humans have a tendency to project our sort of human qualities. We anthropomorphize the technology. This is not nothing new. We do this all the time. You can just think about your car. Your car makes a strange knocking sound and it starts to shut down, and you start pounding the steering wheel and you start screaming at it. Come on, you stupid thing, work. Well, obviously that's dumb because it's a mechanical instrument that's not going to listen to you. It's
It
not
can't
like
hear you. No,
conversation.
it doesn't have the five senses.
Hear you, right? You're just anthropomorphizing. But we really have a tendency to do this with Chat GPT and AI agents, weak AI agents like Siri, Alexa, and so on. And this kind of colors the entire discussion around this technology. And just think about the terminology that we're using. We call it artificial intelligence, right? And when you use that word intelligence, we're kind of putting something onto the technology that doesn't necessarily exist. This is where you start getting into the philosophical debates. Is it intelligence? Is it conscious? Is it not? And so on. And I would just recommend to all of your listeners, this is really great paper. It came out about a year and a half ago in the summer of 2024. And it's a really great paper. I can't remember the author, but the title is super easy to remember. And it's very easy to read. It's not very long. It's written for the general lay audience mostly. It has a little bit of technical stuff in it, and it is only about 8 or 9 pages long. And the title of the paper is "Chat GPT is Bullshit." That's the literal title of the paper. So all you have to do is go onto Google and type in "Chat GPT is bullshit." And I recommend anybody who's really interested in this topic, just take a few minutes to read that article, because what the authors do is they really go through and lay out a very good argument. Number one, they go into a little bit of the basics of how ChatGPT and other AI agents like that work. Okay, how they actually work, or how we think they work. And then they also get a lot into this idea, like I'm talking about how we humans are anthropomorphizing the technology. So let me give you another example. A lot of it is how we use our language. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, you use ChatGPT a lot, right? Okay, so let's suppose you're using ChatGPT or you're asking it a question and it outputs some kind of really goofy, weird answer that doesn't seem to make sense. Or maybe what you've done is you've asked it to create a picture, a literal visualization, and there's something wrong about the picture. Like, instead of a hand where a hand's supposed to be, it's like a foot, or it's got 7 fingers instead of 5 fingers or something like that. What is that typically called when that kind of thing happens? When the AI outputs something like that, what's that called? Do you know what the word is that's often used to describe that?
When it makes a mistake?
Well, the word that is used often is hallucination.
Oh, interesting.
Right. They say when that kind of thing happens, people say, "Oh, well, the AI is having a hallucination."
Oh, interesting. Okay, I see.
And I remember the first time I heard that.
AI is tripping.
a hallucination? Like what are you talking about, a hallucination? And really what it is it's an output error.
Right.
It's like you said, it's a mistake, right? What we have is you have this algorithm that is running and it gets something wrong and it has an output error. And this output error manifests as this, weird thing where you've got 7 fingers instead of 5, or, there's a foot growing out of the person's head, or whatever the hell it is, right?
Right.
And the language that has been used as long as I can remember to describe this is the word hallucination. Now, the thing about the word hallucination is just using that word, and that sort of projects the idea that there is some kind of consciousness behind it, right? Because what else hallucinates? Well, we hallucinate. Humans hallucinate, right? You have an acid trip, or you get hit in the head, or you don't get enough sleep or something, right? You start seeing things that aren't there. You hallucinate, right? And so when we use the language of hallucination to describe an output error for an AI agent like ChatGPT, for example, what we're doing, the authors of this paper are arguing, is we are projecting onto this AI agent the idea of some kind of consciousness being there, which isn't necessarily correct, right? It isn't necessarily a conscious thing. It's how we are thinking about how this works, right? And so it's kind of interesting. The title of the article that I mentioned is "Chat GPT is bullshit," but the actual bullshit, I think, is how we humans think about the technology. We kind of mix all of this stuff up. We call it intelligent. Well, is it really intelligent? We say it hallucinates. Well, hallucination kind of presupposes the idea that there's some kind of consciousness there. Well, is Siri really conscious? No, it's an algorithm, right? And so it's kind of an interesting little foible of how humans are interacting with the technology. Now, does that mean that the technology cannot, by definition, progress to a point where could become conscious? And this is where you get into all kinds of interesting debates about, what is consciousness, right? So you get into philosophical discussions of the hard and soft problems of consciousness. You get into debates about biology, right? Is it necessarily the case that a brain, with which we associate consciousness for a lot of good reasons, is it necessarily the case that a brain has to be made of biomechanical circuitry, such as all this squishy stuff inside of our craniums? Is it possible that you could have an electromechanical brain made of circuitry, specifically, say, neural networks and similar kinds of things, right? Because the whole idea of a neural network is it's supposed to be a network of circuitry which mimics neural networks inside of the human brain, right? That's kind of the whole idea. And so you get into all of these, you can get into all of those debates, and there are a lot of those debates going on in sort of the AI technology community and so on and so forth. But I think, I think while some of those debates and discussions are happening, including, safety concerns and so on about what can be done with the technology, or, could it turn into Skynet and annihilate humanity at some point or whatever. I think that there is really, really a lot of focus right now on just kind of winning the AI race, which could be considered problematic for a variety of reasons, depending upon who you talk to. Because there is a race. I mean, there's no doubt that there's a race. China is working a whole heck of a lot on this technology. The United States is working a lot on this technology. You have all these private companies. You have OpenAI and Google and all these other humongous tech companies that are working on the technology. And it's kind of exciting and exhilarating and scary, all bundled up at the same time, because nobody knows where it's going.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah. So, so I would recommend anybody who's interested in this topic, first of all, take a look at that paper. And it's free. You can just download the PDF off the internet for no cost. Just Google Chat GPT is bullshit. Take some time to read it. It's a great read. It's very easy to read. And and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I will definitely check that out. That's interesting
Yeah.
because, like I said, like I mean, and I when I first kind of got into Chat GPT, I tested it a few times to make sure that I wasn't being snowed. It's like the same thing I did with Wikipedia when Wikipedia was up and coming. I'm like,
Right.
okay, like I would think topics that I knew, I was confident that I knew of, like
Right.
philosophical stuff. Okay, so I type in like Plato again, Plato's Metaphysics or whatever.
Mhm.
Come up, I read it. I'm like, yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a bit. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but it's not wrong. Stuff like that. So I did that with Chat GPT, and everything seemed to come up hunky dory. But I'll look for these like no hands where hands should be or something like that.
Right.
See if it's see if it's because some of the pros of AI are efficiency. It's extremely efficient, very quick, enhanced decision making, personalization. It can customize just about anything you want. I remember, like, I just have this kind of like a little hobby of mine is I love tarot decks. I just think they're fascinating, right? I've got like tons of them. So I remember I typed in like make me the magician's card or something like that, and it made like within 10 seconds I made like one of the most beautiful tarot cards I've ever seen in my life. Like it was just like boom, like that. So it's super super. You can personalize anything you want. Obviously a lot of economic opportunities are going to come up, and the fact that it's scalable, it can keep growing is a good thing. We usually like technology that can do that, but we just got to keep it in check to make sure that we're not destroy. One of the things is the loss of jobs. Like a lot of people, like you're automating cars and you're automating machines and stuff like that. I mean, if you know what the word Luddite means from back in the 1800s,
Yeah.
when like
Yeah.
even more primitive technology was up and coming, and they were going in there and like burning down factories and warehouses making stuff because like you're going to take our jobs away. And how how adaptable, resilient an economic system can be. This would be a really strong test. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, let me try to unpackage a few things you mentioned there. First of all, let me just say a few things about how a lot of the current AI tech works. So when you dig into this, you find out that, and I'll throw a little bit of terminology in here. You'll hear a term called LLM that is often used to refer to things like ChatGPT. And what LLM stands for is large language model. Okay, and what a large language model is it's kind of a wordy way of saying, okay, this is a set of circuitry, most often a neural network, that is usually run on what are called GPUs, graphics processing units. And for people who don't know what okay, so in your computer right now, there's usually what's called a CPU, central processing unit.
Mm-hmm.
What a GPU is a graphics processing unit. It's a separate card that really specializes in doing really good quality graphics on your computer, like video, pictures, and so on and so forth, like that. So if you play an online game like World of Warcraft or something like that, and you've got like the really amazing graphics and stuff, you're seeing that because of the processing power of the GPUs, right? And the GPUs have a ton of processing power. And those are the chips that are actually used to create these large processing units in the data centers. And those large processing units in the data centers, and lots and tons of them, they are used to run the large language model. Okay, so the large language model is basically this. What you do is you quote, train the AI by inputting into it a ton of data, right? And then what happens is the GPUs, as part of this big neural network in the data centers, they kind of churn through all this data. And what they're doing is they're looking for patterns. So really what an LLM is the way I understand it, is it's basically a very large pattern recognition algorithm. That's essentially what it does, right? So you shove tons of data into these things. They churn through them. And when I say tons of data, I mean like the internet's worth of data, right? So you may have heard stories in the last few years about how, the people training GPT, they've kind of gotten themselves into legal trouble with, say Wikipedia or authors of various books or this database or that database, because what they did is they were essentially going out and scouring the internet for just tons of data to feed into these LLMs. And then the LLMs, the algorithms using the processing power of the GPUs and the data centers, they churn through this, and they're looking for all these patterns and stuff. And so what's happening is when you query Chat GPT, say, give me a recipe for chicken soup or something like that, what it's actually doing is it's kind of going through and doing some pattern recognition. It's not necessarily copying and pasting stuff that it found on the internet, though it can do that. But if you're asking it, say, a novel type question, like, you come up with something unique and you say, well, show me a recipe for chicken soup for 5 people using these ingredients and da 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 da. And what it's doing is it's kind of like saying, okay, I think I know what the question is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to like put this part of the answer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do pattern recognition and look for the next most probable part of the answer. And then once I have that, I'm going to look for the next most probable part of the answer, and so on. And then it strings all that together and it gives you an output, right? And it could do that in text. It could do that in terms of a spreadsheet. It could do that in terms of a picture, a video, whatever, or an audio, whatever. But that's essentially how these LLMs work. And in order for that to function, like I said, you need a ton of processing power, right? So what a lot of people don't understand, I think, is that they have Chat GPT sitting here on their laptop. They go to the website or whatever. And full disclosure, I've actually never used Chat GPT.
Really?
Yeah, seriously. I'm not a Luddite in the sense that I'm opposed to the technology. I've just never seen a need to use it. I mean, I've used weak AI like Siri and stuff like that, and I've used AI in the context of you do a Google search and you get the little AI output at the top of the screen. But I've never actually gone to Chat GPT and used it for anything. I personally never felt the need to. Not that I'm opposed to it or anything. But the idea is, when you're doing that, people see, oh, there's this little website where there's Chat GPT, and I just type something in. But on the other end of that, what you're doing is you're actually sending this query, and it's going through to some data center, who knows where all these GPUs are. It's processing the hell out of this, and it uses an immense amount of computing power to come up with the answer. And then it spits it back out to, your terminal, wherever you are, and says, oh, okay, here's the recipe for chicken soup given these conditions, and blah, blah, blah. Now, because of that, there are some fundamental limitations to how LLMs can, to certain things that LLMs can do. Like you say, LLMs are very good at organizing and processing large amounts of data. So I'll give you another example. I know someone whose mother was looking for a doctor to do some kind of medical procedure, right? But they didn't even know where to start, right? So what they did is they queried ChatGPT and they said, okay, in this geographic area, list all of the doctors that specialize in such and such, and kind of list their medical history and credentials and so on, right? And then ChatGPT kind of chunked through it and gave an output in the form of a nice clean spreadsheet, all of that sort of stuff. Now, like you say, you want to always kind of check the work, right? You don't necessarily want to assume that what it's giving you is good, because remember the way LLMs work. The way LLMs work is they're based on probabilities, right? So what the LLM is doing is it's stringing together that answer. And it's like, okay, what's the next most probable thing that's going to go after this? And then that's the most probable thing that's going to go after that, and that, and that, and that, right? And so because you're dealing with probabilities, it could screw up, right? You could get an output error, or, to use the anthropomorphized language, a quote hallucination, right? So of course you always want to check the work. But this friend of mine, she got this spreadsheet. She was like, oh, okay, cool. And it just really nicely organized the information and made it very easy to, go through and look at it and kind of check it and so on, as opposed to trying to, go out there and find it all on her own and then put it together. The Chat GPT was able to do that for her. So for things like that, I think it's really good, as long as you check the work and make sure it's not, screwing something up in the process. And in that sense, it's a very powerful tool. But there are some limitations, And this is where, you start running up into what we were talking about earlier, right? You start running up into, well, are we getting to the point where we can do, say, artificial general intelligence, and of course, thinking longer term, artificial super intelligence? And, depending upon who you talk to, some people say, well, obviously we're going to get there, right? Because most of the AI research right now is taking what I call a brute force approach, where they're basically saying, okay, let's just build bigger and bigger data centers, and let's just have more brute force computing power with all of these GPUs. And by the way, this is why NVIDIA stock has gone like this over the last few years, because NVIDIA is one of the primary companies that builds the GPUs, right? And all the AI companies are just buying that stuff up like crazy for the data centers. And so this brute force approach that says, well, obviously, if you just have bigger and bigger data centers and more processing power, you're going to get there. Well, that's one view. But then there are other people that take the view that there is a fundamental limitation on how much the LLMs can do. And that fundamental limitation has to do with, well, you can only input so much data into this thing, right? There are people who argue that, once you have put the internet's worth of data, which I think they've pretty much gotten close to doing, or if they haven't done it already, but once you put the internet's worth of data into this thing to, quote, train the AI, then what else do you put in? There's nothing else to put in because you've already put everything in. And so there's kind of an argument going on now. There are some people that say, well, pretty soon what we're going to do is we're going to see sort of the abilities of these LLMs and other AI agents kind of go up, and then they're going to start to plateau because we've reached kind of this fundamental limit. But then you have other people that say, oh, no, somehow the processing power is going to break through that. And then what you're going to get is you're going to get these AI agents. By the way, AI agents, again, that's another anthropomorphizing. AI agent, that's basically an algorithmic program, right? That's bizarre. But you get these, quote, AI agents that are going to somehow get to the point where they can kind of train themselves, right? And then they start training themselves, and they're going to kind of break past that plateau and then keep going to new heights. Personally, I don't know how that would happen. But, apparently there are a lot of people in the AI researching world that think that will happen. But again, there's a big debate about, well, how far can you push the technology, and can you even get to the point of AGI or more, or I guess more importantly, artificial superintelligence? Is that even achievable given the potential for these limits on the technology? So again, that's kind of a debate that's raging, but it's not stopping a lot of the big tech companies, and it's not stopping China and the United States government from really trying to push this brute force method of, quote, making the AI smarter or more powerful. And where it goes, who knows? We don't really know.
Nobody knows exactly. I think that's part of the problem. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, any kind of cutting edge technological development always runs into this. Nobody never really knows where the technology is going to go. And the technology in and of itself, the attitude I take, the technology in and of itself is not good or evil. It's what we do with it. It's what humans do with it, right? Now, leaving aside the entire question of, well, could we develop an artificial superintelligence that, it could either turn human civilization into a utopia, or it could just destroy us all. Leaving all that aside, in the interim, we could use this technology for great things. We could use it for horrible things, just like, any kind of technology. We could use nuclear power to provide, relatively clean power for, society, or we could use it to build cobalt bombs. I mean, you could do all these things with this technology. It's really kind of up to us. And I think what you kind of were talking about is maybe the more immediate concern. I mean, we can have these discussions about the longer term concerns about artificial superintelligence if we could ever get there. But in the more immediate term, we have questions of, okay, well, what is this technology going to do in terms of economics, right? How is it going to displace people? And we know that's already happened. We know a lot of people have lost jobs, and those jobs aren't necessarily ever going to come back because AI has displaced them, right? People who were, say, secretaries, right? Administrative assistants. A lot of those type of tasks can be taken over by these AI agents and done. Like I was talking about with the spreadsheet, right? The thing with the spreadsheet and ranking the doctors and all that. That's something that would have taken a human probably a day or more to do. But ChatGPT was able to do it for my friend in less than a minute. So when you're looking at things like that, companies are going to say, hey, we can use these AI agents to do these types of tasks. So why do we need to have somebody in that position? Right. And so maybe that person loses their job. Or you get situations like what's happening now with young people who are just graduating from college, who are running into a job market where the thing they went to college for just 4 or 5 years previously, the job market is being decimated because
Right.
of this technology. And I feel kind of bad for younger people because, I mean, just think about this. Just think about the timeline. ChatGPT came out to the public in December of 2022, just barely 3 years ago, right? Now, if you were going into college, if you were a student who just graduated high school and you're going into college, say 4 or 5 years ago, right? Then what happened, right? You go into college and maybe you're going to major in some kind of like business administration, or maybe you're going to computer science or something like that, right? Something along those lines. And now you're just graduating 3 years after this technology has come along, and there's been all of this displacement in that 3-year period of time because ChatGPT has really developed and done a lot of things in other AI agents in the last 3 years. Some of them being administrative tasks, like at business. Like, so you got all these kids coming out of business school who can't find entry-level jobs because the AI is doing a lot of that stuff. You got computer science majors who spent all this time learning how to code. Well, now you got the AI and ChatGPT. These things are doing a lot of the coding now, so they can't get jobs. And so it's really kind of hit those people pretty hard. So you got a lot of people who are losing jobs to the AI technology, and then you've got a whole other group of people who can't get jobs because of the same thing. And that's all happened so quickly within 3 years. And that's fast. That is really fast. And so the issue is, I think, in that regard, it's not necessarily the fact that the technology is developing, it's the rate at which it's developing. It's developing so quickly that in some ways humans are having a really hard time keeping up and adjusting to the changes. Now, whether that rate of change is going to continue, right? There are some people that say, oh, it's just naturally going to keep going until we get to artificial superintelligence, or whether it's going to plateau and we're going to see the rate of change just kind of fundamentally slow down. That's still an open question. But the fact that it has changed so quickly in the last 3 years, yeah, that's caused a lot of disruption. And I anticipate it could continue causing more economic disruption and maybe even social disruption, because there are other factors that have gone along with this that don't have anything to do with economics. So,
yeah, no, Alexandria is on here saying that writers are too affected by this thing because, yeah, you can get AI can write a novel in like moments.
right.
It can make a movie. It can, like, Hollywood's freaking out because, like, make a movie with Brad Pitt and George Clooney, and they're in the desert fighting bad guys.
Yeah. I actually saw something. It's hilarious that you mentioned that, and I can't remember the name of it, but I actually saw something in the news a few weeks ago where there was a movie that came out that actually has an actor in it, which is an AI generated actor. And that actor is written into the credits, right? It's not a human. It's a purely AI generated actor in this whole movie. And I don't know if it's like a major film or if it's like a little short or an independent film or whatever. But I remember reading something in the news about that, and I was just like, huh. And then I thought to myself, well, that was inevitable, right? It's only a matter of time before stuff like that starts happening. And so in a sense there, what you've got is it's almost like you're looking at a cartoon, except it's a really good cartoon. and you don't have to have anybody to do voiceovers because it does its own voice, right? So what you have is you have the actor themselves being kind of taken, the human actor being kind of completely taken out of the process. And I could see why some people in Hollywood might be, including writers, would be a little upset by that. I mean, so yeah, so a lot of change coming in that
Yeah,
regard.
no, for sure. It's going to be, to say the least, interesting to see what happens.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even touch the whole topic of, again, how do humans interact with the technology? And this is where, it's very interesting to look at science fiction and so on. Do you remember a movie? I guess you could call it a science fiction movie. From it's a little over 10 years ago. I think it was starred Joaquin Phoenix, called Her. It's a very interesting movie because the whole story is it's about this guy. He's kind of a recluse, and he lives alone, and he falls in love with an AI, right? And it's the whole story is about how he develops this relationship with this AI, and you can see this in other contexts. Like you look at the newest Blade Runner movie, right? The newest Blade Runner movie, where the main character also kind of falls in love with an AI, and she falls in love with him, and that's kind of an aspect to it. So this is something that's kind of been a staple of science fiction for a long, long time. But now we are getting to the point where we might actually start kind of seeing that, because what you've got reports of people who are, again, the way we project onto the technology with our human qualities. You're talking to this thing day after day. It's having a quote conversation with you day after day. So you start kind of, treating it as if it's a consciousness, if it's quote, alive. And you may have read, you can read stories in the news, about how, there was an unfortunate case, and I think this is working its way through the courts right now, where the parents of this kid, he killed himself, and he was talking to Chat GPT or some AI agent about this, and almost seeking therapy through the Chat GPT, and at some point there was a quote hallucination. Let's call it an output error.
Right. It said you should
Eventually,
do it. Yeah.
yeah, eventually the Chat GPT started saying, "Well, this is how you should kill yourself," and then
Yeah.
the
No,
kid
I heard
did.
about that. That's
Right?
nuts.
I mean, it's this horrible situation, but again, that's the kind of thing that we're getting at, because and now there are concerns that what we could be seeing is we could be seeing a situation where younger people who are very comfortable with this technology could say start quote developing relationships with it, as opposed to developing human peer-to-peer relationships. And so in that sense, the science fiction of years and years, days gone by, has actually started to creep into a little bit more reality. And so that's another area of concern too. How do you navigate that, right? So
Yeah, no, again, like I said, it's gonna it's gonna be interesting to see. I don't know.
it sure isn't going to be boring.
Really won't be boring.
Oh no.
So
Well,
okay, let's. I mean, I don't want to keep anybody longer than an hour. So let's talk a little bit about physics and phlophosophy.
sure.
But you,
Let's go
you
for
have
that.
a degree in both, or was like your physics or philosophy a minor, or do you have two degrees?
No, what happened is I got a degree in physics. I got a bachelor's degree in physics in the mid '90s, and then I went to graduate school and I got a master's degree in physics. And what I did is I taught for many, many years, and I decided back in 2012 to get a degree in philosophy. And the reason why I did that is because I co-taught a course with a colleague of mine. Um, I co-taught a course in the history of science, and I got and in preparing for that course, I learned so much. I started to really learn, a lot more about the philosophical underpinnings of science. And then I decided, hey, this stuff is really interesting. So I decided to get a degree in philosophy. And from 2012 to 2018, I worked on my degree of philosophy, and I finally got it in the end of 2018. Yeah, and people asked me, they said, "Why are you getting a degree in philosophy?" And I gave a very philosophical answer: because I can. I have the means, I have the interest, so why not, right? And I'm really glad I did, because To harken back to the previous discussion, it's very interesting. I remember learning so much about a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. What is consciousness? What does it mean to be alive? And can, quote, machines be alive and be conscious? All this stuff. I learned about all of that stuff when I was taking courses in philosophy.
Right.
And so now when I'm looking at all the stuff with AI, I'm just so thankful that I did that, because I feel that I can look at this in a much more informed way.
Yeah.
All of these, big questions that are coming out now, and it's really quite fascinating. But it is really nice to have the physics background and the philosophy background. And I will just say, for anybody who's listening, there are a lot of people that think that philosophy is just kind of smoking weed and tripping out and going, "Oh, cosmic, man," all this sort of stuff. No, that is not true at all. Philosophy, the study of philosophy, is actually a very, very rigorous endeavor. It was much more rigorous than I expected it to be. And you really have to know your stuff. You really have to read a lot. You have to think very carefully about things. You have to form very solid arguments and be able to debate back and forth. And you have to be able to poke holes in your own arguments in addition to arguments that you're trying to refute. It's a very rigorous discipline, and it's a worthy study. I think it's a very worthy study.
Oh, I agree.
And so if anybody has the interest, I say to them, yes, study philosophy. It actually underpins a lot of what we do in society. It underpins law, governance, ethics. Well, God, ethics is a whole branch of philosophy.
Logic.
It underpins scientific
philosophy of science, epistemology.
The whole bit. Epistemology, the study of knowledge. How do we know what we know? All of these things. It's a very worthwhile study. So, having said that, I'll pitch it back to you.
I fully agree with you 100%. I got into it for more for just I always kind of had the bigger questions in mind, the identity of the existence and therefore the nature of God or gods. I was plagued by that since I was a child.
Oh, sure.
I'm I gotta know if God exists, is the Bible right, or if not, if God exists and it's a different religion. I mean, this could be the eternity of your soul, man. I need to know the answers to this crap.
Or even more fundamental questions such as what is a soul, or does a soul even exist?
What is a soul? Right.
You get into these really basic fundamental questions. You start getting into things like, Cartesian dualism, right? Is the mind and body something separate, right? Or is there no delineation, like Daniel Dennett would say? Is there no delineation whatsoever between mind and body? There's just physicality, and and then you get into all of the implications of all of that sort of stuff. But having the perspective from both physics and philosophy is wild, because it allows you to come up with some really crazy stuff. Do you want me to throw out one of the things that I consider to be like one of my craziest ideas about stuff? Okay, so I'll get a little physicsy here for a second, right? Have you ever heard of what's called multiverse theory?
Yes.
Okay, so just so your listeners are aware, what multiverse theory is, the idea that there could be, say, multiple universes beyond our own. And there are a variety of ways of thinking of this. It's kind of it's a quasi scientific idea, in the sense that the idea of a multiverse is informed by what we understand about modern science. But I call it quasi scientific because, for reasons that will become apparent soon, it's not necessarily testable in the traditional scientific manner. Right?
It's a theory.
Not really. Yeah, it's kind of stretching the limits here, right? One view of multiverse theory, and there are lots of views, and if you're really curious to read more, just Google Max Tegmark, Tegmark.
Oh, I know Max Tegmark. Yeah.
Yeah, Google Max Tegmark's multiverse hierarchy. That's a good place to start. Anyway,
real quick to add to that, Max Tegmark and Roger Penrose. Those are the two dudes. If you like philosophy and physics, they're your guys. Go ahead.
And I'll throw out another guy, and I've got one of his books over here. Oh shoot, where is it? I was telling you about him before, and for some stupid reason, I just forgot his name, and it's killing me that I just forgot his name. Damn, what's his name? Yeah, I'm having a senior moment. I'll think
You're
of it
gonna have
later.
like at 3 a.m. You're gonna wake up to go pee or something.
Yeah, I'll
like
wake up at 3 a.m. and go, oh, damn. I just remembered. Victor Stinger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Victor Stinger is another good person if you're interested in both physics and philosophy. Victor Stinger's great. So anyway, having said that, a very simple version, which to me is logically perfectly reasonable, of multiverse theory is the idea that our universe is infinite in extent. There is the observable universe, which is the universe that we have seen up until this point, 14 plus billion years past the Big Bang, because light travels at a finite speed, and so we can only see a certain section of the universe. But there is beyond that, so to speak, cosmic horizon, more universe that we just haven't seen yet. And if we wait long enough, we'll see more and more and more of it. Okay. We have no reason to doubt the possibility that our universe is infinite in extent. Now, let's think about what that actually means. If the universe is infinite in extent, right, then this view of the multiverse, which Max Tegmark will call a level 1 multiverse, this view of the multiverse posits that there are sections of this vaster infinite universe that we can't ever possibly interact with. And if you are dealing with a truly infinite universe, then it's perfectly logical to suppose that somewhere, some unbelievable number of light years away, there is another you and me sitting down having this exact conversation, right? Somewhere else out in the universe, where the difference between that situation and this situation is like the microscopic placement of one electron.
Right. Like there's one atom missing from your room, and it's a parallel reality, right?
But for all it's the same thing, right? And so if that were true, which logically is possible given what we know about the universe at this point, then what does that mean about identity? And this is where we start to transfer into philosophy, right? You start to then ask questions of, what does that mean for identity? Are you, or are you just one of an infinite number of copies of you? And if you are, does that mean you are not unique, right? And are all these other yous, do they have to live the same life as you, or are you simultaneously living an essentially infinite number of different lives at the same time, right? And so this is the type of stuff you can get into if you really understand physics and philosophy. And that's one of my personal faves, is to kind of throw out to people as a nice example of how the two can kind of meld. Because every single time I've had that conversation with people, they just kind of give me the mind blown blank stare, like, whoa, wait a minute, what? And I'm like, think about it, right? I mean, we don't have any evidence against the idea that our universe could be infinite. We just can't see it all, right? And if that's the case, why can't there be another you out there? Why can't there be if it's infinite, why can't there be an infinite number of yous? And and Matt number 2 at this particular moment decides to get up and go get a drink. Matt number 3, at that particular moment, eats a handful of nuts. Matt number 4.
Dave number 2 just kind of went like this instead of this.
Exactly.
And it's a different world.
Well, it's a different world, but it's all following the same laws of physics, because and so that's one of my favorite examples to give to people as kind of a wild way where you can kind of use the two realms of knowledge to kind of intermix and come up with things. There are plenty of others. And like you say, if you look at some of the stuff Roger Penrose has written, or people like Max Tegmark or David Deutsch, or Victor Stinger, you read their stuff, they get into all of this sort of stuff too. It's wild. It's great.
Yeah, no, what's his name? Hillary Putnam was and Willard Klein. They were like, I mean, they were more specifically philosophers, but they were Platonic philosophers and did a lot with philosophy of science. What's his name? Crap. I'm not gonna remember. Steven something, whatever.
Pinker?
Who?
Steven Pinker.
No, isn't he a linguist? No, he's a psychologist. No, he's a psychologist.
I thought he was a neuroscientist. Anyway, I can't remember.
Maybe he's a
But yeah,
neuroscientist. That's not who I'm thinking of. But anyway, okay. Lots of philosophy of science out there. Really interesting stuff. And like,
go on.
well, just like issues like like again, which side of the aisle really want to kind of take the reign on these things? Like things like, well, what is the nature of being, like ontology? Like, what does it mean to exist? What does existence mean? Okay, like if I can imagine something in my mind, does it necessarily exist because I can think it? Because it has a form, like a mathematical geometrical structure. Stuff like that. That's a very fundamental question. It's like, what does it mean for like, go Platonism? Are numbers real?
Right.
Because a lot of people would say if they're not real, we got big problems.
Yeah.
Then science is useless.
And then you get to the classical Cartesian question. I think therefore I am, and you get people that take one extreme that argue that the mind is all that there is. Mind is all there is. Yeah, and then panpsychism, right? And then you get to the opposite extreme where people are like, well, no, there's no such thing as the mind. There's only, you get to two extremes of monism, right? Monism is to say something is monistic is to say that it is there's only one thing that exists. And on the one extreme, you have people that say the mind is all that exists, and then on the other extreme, you say no, there is no such thing as mind. It's just it's just physical stuff. Right.
So like panpsychism or like materialism, like there's all that exists is matter.
Yeah, physical is materialism. Yeah. And then you have like all these degradations in between and so on and so forth. And I just, again, one of my favorite things I ever read was God, who was it? I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was somebody who was, there was someone arguing about, it's panpsychism, mind is all that exists, like this rock, they point to a rock. This rock really isn't here. And then, the other person says, I refute it thus, and they kick the rock with their foot, and now they're limping around going, ow, right?
It was somebody's response to it was somebody's response to Bishop Berkeley.
Right, that's it. That's the
said
one.
That everything is mind. And whoever refused, like, I reviewed him thusly, and he kicks a rock.
He kicks a rock. Yeah. He breaks his toe, and he's limping. He's like, yeah, tell me that's not
right.
I mean, it's very interesting when you get into these sorts of discussions, because whenever I get into those sorts of discussions, I try to be what I call a pragmatic philosopher, because I like to kind of say, we can argue, well, the mind is the only thing that exists, physicality is the only thing that exists, and all this sort of stuff. But I like my philosophy to be practical in the sense that, well, how can it inform your everyday life, right? And and then when you start getting into that stuff, you start getting away from classical philosophy altogether, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when you start getting into more 20th century type philosophy, which kind of got away from the old classical mold of philosophy of having that argumentation. And then you start getting into, things like nihilism. You get into the existentialists. You get into all of that sort of stuff, which in and of itself is very interesting. I mean, it's tough to read them, but anybody who can get through it, I highly recommend Sartre's work of existential. Sartre,
absolutely.
Sartre. Right, essays in existentialism. It's really kind of interesting, and just kind of give you an idea of like maybe a nice way to a nice modern way to kind of think about existentialism. I'm sure a lot of your listeners and viewers will have seen the Matrix movies, right? Mm-hmm. And there's this one great scene. There's a lot of philosophy all through the Matrix movies. But there's this one really great scene, and I think it's either the second or the third movie, where it's like the big showdown between Agent Smith, AI. nice little coming around to it. Right? There's this epic battle between Agent Smith and Neo, and just Agent Smith is just beating the shit out of Neo, just pounding him, right? And it's like one Agent Smith, and Neo looks up, and there's like an infinite number of Agent Smiths. So even if he beats him, he's got an infinite number of fight, and he's just getting the crap knocked out of him by this one Agent Smith. And then what's happening is, he's at the bottom of this crater, and he's just all beat up, and he gets up, and Agent Smith knocks him down again. And Agent Smith keeps saying to him, why do you keep fighting? You can't win. It's impossible to win. Why do you persist? And then, Neo stands up and says, because I choose to. Nice. And that in and of itself, that's like an encapsulation of the philosophy of existentialism. And so, you get into all kinds of really great stuff. Oh, or is that our AI saying time is up?
No, that's ESPN. But we are at an hour. And Alexandra's saying the anime movie that inspired The Matrix is her favorite movie of all time, Ghost in the Shell. I have heard that before. I have never seen Ghost in the Shell.
Yes, Ghost in the Shell.
Cool. No, we could talk about this stuff forever and ever. Maybe we'll have we'll do this again and just talk more, because there's obviously I have 1,000 things going through my head right now.
And maybe somewhere in a parallel universe we are going to keep talking about it. But I think in that one we're out of time, right?
I think mathematically, if there are an infinite amount of us's, we out there, then yes, technically one of them, at least one, we're talking about forever.
Cool.
So. But yeah, like that's, this is really fascinating stuff. I always love it.
Oh yeah.
I love flying. And I agree with the pragmatic approach to it too. Like you can get, because I was into like such the high abstract stuff for some time. I kind of lost a little practicality in it for just a little while, but I was able to ground myself. There's a guy named Nicholas Rusher. He might even still be alive. And he advocates what he calls pragmatic idealism. And it's like, you study philosophy to get the idea of the concepts, the forms, and everything else straightened out in your mind. But then after that, you really should try it. It's actually kind of a matter of ethics. How do I take these principles and these concepts, these perfections that I can conceive of, and apply them into my life? That kind of thing. And like your day-to-day. So critical thinking is very important in day-to-day life. Yep. You study logic and critical thinking and the fallacies. That's very important. As you can call bullshit on people, like President Trump. But so anyway, we're not going to get a politics.
You help yourself, could you?
As soon as I thought fallacy, I thought of him. But okay, cool. So all right, well, Matt Lowry, thank you so much for coming on the show and just inciting my intellect for an hour. That was so much fun.
Anytime. Yeah, we have to do it again because there's so much.
I might have you on maybe once every 2 or 3 months. We're just gonna geek out on this stuff.
Sure, yeah, let's totally do that. I'd love to. This is like brain candy, man.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It really is exciting
to be able to do this. Yeah.
And Alexandria and everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. And Matt, hold on 1 second. I just want to say something to you after the show's over. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk Lake County. I'm your host, David Rich. Till next time, keep talking.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Do.